The evening sky over Cincinnati was a canvas of bruised purples and deep blues, the city's neon lights flickering like fireflies as the sun sank below the horizon. In a modest two-story house on a quiet street, Claire Monroe sat in her wheelchair by the living room window, her fingers tracing the edge of a worn novel she hadn't opened in hours. The hum of the air conditioner was the only sound, a steady drone that couldn't drown out the storm brewing in her mind. 3 years ago, a semi-truck had stolen her legs, her independence, and nearly her will to live. At 35, Claire had been a vibrant dance instructor, her body a symphony of motion. Now, at 38, she was a woman tethered to a wheelchair, her world shrinking to the walls of this house. But the accident had given her something unexpected, someone. Her stepson Ethan, now 22, a construction worker with rough hands and a quiet strength that filled the empty spaces of her life. Claire glanced at the clock on the mantel. Past 9 p.m. The house was still save for the faint creak of floorboards from Ethan's room upstairs. He'd been distant since dinner, retreating to his space with a mumbled excuse about work. Curiosity laced with something she didn't want to name tugged at her. She wheeled herself down the hallway, her movements silent on the polished wood floor. Ethan's door was ajar, a sliver of warm light spilling into the dark corridor. She paused, her breath catching. She shouldn't intrude, but the pull was too strong. With a gentle push, she eased the door open, and her heart stopped. Ethan sat on his bed, his broad shoulders hunched, his laptop glowing in the dim room. The screen cast sharp shadows across his face, and Claire's eyes locked onto what he was watching, an adult film, raw and unfiltered, the kind that left nothing to the imagination. His hand moved beneath the thin blanket draped over his lap, his jaw tight, his cheeks flushed with a mix of focus and shame. "Ethan." Claire said, her voice soft but piercing the heavy silence. He jolted his head, snapping up as if she'd fired a gun. The laptop slammed shut, his face turning scarlet. "Claire, I didn't hear you." He yanked the blanket higher, as if it could shield him from her gaze. She maneuvered her wheelchair into the room, closing the door behind her with a soft click. Her heart raced, but she kept her expression calm. Her arms crossed over her chest. "What are you doing?" she asked, though the answer hung in the air like smoke. Ethan looked away, his fingers twisting the edge of the blanket. I was just..." His voice trailed off, defeated. "It's okay," Claire said, her tone gentle but firm. "You don't have to explain. I know what you were doing." The room fell silent, the air thick with unspoken words. Ethan's shoulders tensed, his breath uneven. Claire studied him, her eyes softening as she saw the vulnerability in his posture, the way he seemed to shrink under her gaze. She wheeled closer, stopping at the edge of his bed, her presence both comforting and unsettling. "Ethan, do you want to talk about it?" she asked, her voice low, inviting. He hesitated, his eyes flickering to hers before dropping again. "I'm just nervous," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "About Rachel. We've been together for a few months and she wants to take things further, but I don't know what I'm doing. I'm scared I'll screw it up." Claire nodded, her heart aching for him. She reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder, her touch warm and steady. "It's normal to feel that way, Ethan. Everyone's nervous their first time. It's a big step." He looked up at her, his hazel eyes wide with a mix of gratitude and desperation. "What if I'm terrible? What if she's disappointed?" Claire chuckled softly, squeezing his shoulder. "You're overthinking it. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present. Talk to her, listen to her. Take it slow. You'll be fine." Ethan nodded, but doubt lingered in his expression. "I just wish I knew what to expect. I don't want to let her down." Claire's chest tightened. She wanted to ease his fears, to give him the confidence he needed, but words felt inadequate. "You'll figure it out," she said, standing her ground, but feeling the weight of his uncertainty. She rose from the bed, her wheelchair gliding back toward the door. Trust yourself. As she left, closing the door behind her, she leaned against the wall in the hallway, her pulse racing. The image of Ethan's flushed face, his vulnerability burned in her mind. She wanted to help him, to guide him through this moment of fear and inexperience. But how far could she go? The question gnawed at her as she returned to the living room. Her thoughts a tangled mess of duty and desire. The days that followed were heavy with unspoken tension. Ethan's confession lingered like a ghost, haunting their interactions. Claire noticed the way he fidgeted at the dinner table, his fork tapping against his plate, his eyes distant. She saw the weight of his anxiety, and it tore at her. She'd been his stepmother for 7 years, marrying his father when Ethan was 15. Their bond had grown strong, a mix of maternal care and easy friendship. But now, faced with his insecurities, Claire felt a reckless urge to cross a line she'd never dared to approach. One evening, as she chopped vegetables in the kitchen, her mind drifted. Ethan sprawled on the living room couch, scrolling through his phone, his leg bouncing restlessly. Claire set down her knife, wiped her hands on a towel, and wheeled herself to the doorway. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice cutting through the quiet. He looked up, startled. "Yeah, you okay? You've been quiet lately." He shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "I'm fine, just thinking." Claire wheeled closer, stopping beside the couch. "Is this about Rachel? About what we talked about?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I can't stop worrying about it. It's all I think about." Her heart ached for him. She reached out, placing a hand on his arm, her touch lingering. "It's normal to feel that way. But you can't let it consume you. You'll figure it out when the time comes." He looked at her, his eyes searching hers. "I wish I could be sure. I don't want to mess it up." Claire's resolve hardened. Words weren't enough. She needed to do something bold, something that would give him the confidence he craved. That night, as she lay in bed, her mind raced with possibilities. By morning, a plan had formed, risky, unconventional, but undeniable. She would guide him not just with advice, but with action. Over the next few days, Claire began to shift her behavior. She traded her loose sweatpants for fitted leggings that hugged her curves, pairing them with low-cut tops that hinted at the body she still took pride in. She left her bedroom door slightly ajar when she changed, knowing Ethan might catch a glimpse of her silhouette as he passed by. One afternoon, she accidentally sent him a link to an adult video, claiming it was meant for a friend. His phone buzzed while they sat in the living room, and she watched his face flush as he fumbled to close the app, her lips curving into a subtle smile. Each interaction left Ethan flustered, his eyes lingering on her when he thought she wasn't looking. Claire could see the confusion in his gaze, the way he struggled to reconcile his feelings. Her plan was working slowly, dismantling the barriers between them, creating a space where she could guide him in a way that felt natural, even if it was forbidden. By the end of the week, Claire knew it was time to escalate. She sat at the kitchen table one evening, her heart pounding as she rehearsed her next move. Ethan sat across from her, poking at his dinner, his brow furrowed. She took a deep breath and made her decision. She would be the one to teach him, to show him how to be confident and attentive, to ensure he wouldn't falter when the time came with Rachel. It was a choice that thrilled and terrified her, but she knew it was the only way. The next morning, Claire sat at her vanity, brushing her hair with deliberate strokes, her mind focused on the day ahead. She wore a silk robe that clung to her skin, the deep neckline revealing just enough to draw attention. Ethan was in the kitchen eating cereal, his eyes flickering over her as she wheeled in. "Morning," he mumbled, his voice strained. "Good morning, Claire," replied, her tone light. She poured herself coffee and leaned against the counter, crossing her legs to let the robe slip slightly, revealing a sliver of thigh. "I've been thinking about trying that new Italian place downtown. Everyone's raving about it." Ethan nodded, looking confused. "Sounds good. Why don't you join me?" Claire said, her voice casual, but her eyes locked on his. "It'll be fun." "A dinner date." His eyebrows shot up. "A dinner date? Sure, she said, shrugging as if it were nothing. We haven't spent much time together lately. It'll be nice to catch up. Ethan hesitated, his gaze flickering over her robe again. I guess I could. Great, Claire said, her smile widening. I'll make the reservation for 7. Be ready. She wheeled away, her heart racing. The first step was done. Now she needed to make the evening unforgettable. That afternoon, Claire chose her outfit with care, a crimson dress that hugged her curves, the hemline daringly short, the neckline plunging just enough to tease. She paired it with heels she hadn't worn since the accident, a reminder of the woman she used to be. Her makeup was bold, smoky eyes, red lips to match the dress. She styled her hair in loose waves, letting it cascade over her shoulders. In the mirror, she saw a woman who was still desirable, still powerful, despite everything. Ethan was waiting in the living room, dressed in a dark button-up and jeans, his nervous energy palpable. His eyes widened when he saw her. You look incredible, he said, swallowing hard. Thank you, Claire said, her voice steady, despite the butterflies in her stomach. Let's go. The drive to the restaurant was quiet, the tension between them electric. At the restaurant, a cozy corner table awaited the dim lighting and soft jazz creating an intimate cocoon. Claire sat across from Ethan, crossing her legs slowly, her dress riding up to reveal a hint of thigh. She noticed his eyes linger before he looked away, his cheeks flushing. They ordered, making small talk, but Claire could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers tapped the table. She leaned forward slightly, giving him a glimpse of her cleavage, and brushed her foot against his leg under the table. Ethan stiffened, his eyes darting to hers, before he looked away. His face red. Ethan, she said softly, her voice drawing him back. I want you to know I'm here for you. Whatever you're going through, you can talk to me. He nodded, his voice barely audible. I know, it's just hard to talk about. Claire reached across the table, placing her hand over his, her touch warm and deliberate. You don't have to go through this alone. Ethan stared at her hand, his breath hitching. Claire. Excuse me for a moment, she interrupted, standing and smoothing her dress. I need to use the restroom. In the restroom, Claire took a deep breath, steadying herself. She reached under her dress, slipping off her lace panties and folding them neatly into her purse. She touched up her lipstick, checked her reflection, and returned to the table, her heart pounding. When she sat down, she reached into her purse and slid the panties across the table to Ethan, her voice low and intimate. Keep these, she said, her eyes locking with his. They're yours now. Ethan stared at the folded lace, his face flaming. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Claire smiled, leaning back and signaling the waiter. Check, please, she said, her tone calm, but her pulse racing. The night had only just begun. The air in the restaurant thickened, charged with a tension that pulsed between them. Ethan's hands shook as he reached for his water, his throat dry, his mind a whirlwind. The panties sat on the table, a bold declaration of the line they were crossing. He couldn't look at them or at Claire, his heart hammering like a drum. Claire sipped her wine, her gaze steady, watching every flicker of emotion on his face, confusion, arousal, fear. It was exactly what she'd planned, but she knew she had to be careful. One wrong move could shatter everything. The waiter returned with the check, and Claire paid, leaving a generous tip. She stood smoothing her dress and looked down at Ethan, ready to go. He nodded, his movements stiff as he rose, hesitating before grabbing the panties and shoving them into his pocket. His face burned, but he said nothing. They walked to the car in silence, the cool night air sharp against their skin. Claire's heels clicked rhythmically, each step a reminder of the power she held. Ethan fumbled with the keys, unlocking the car and holding the door for her. Claire slid into the passenger seat, crossing her legs deliberately, her dress riding up to reveal more thigh. She saw his eyes flicker toward her before he looked away, his breathing uneven as he climbed into the driver's seat. The drive home was silent, the tension a living thing between them. Claire glanced at Ethan, noting his white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel, the tightness in his jaw. "Ethan," she said softly, breaking the quiet. He flinched. "Yeah." She shifted crossing her legs slowly, then recrossing them, the hem of her dress inching higher. "You're awfully quiet. Something on your mind?" He shook his head. His voice strained. "No, just thinking about the food. It was good." Claire chuckled, the sound low and teasing. It was delicious. She rested a hand on the console, her fingers brushing his thigh, the touch light but electric. She felt him tense, his muscles twitching under her fingers. At a red light, she spread her legs slightly, her dress shifting to reveal a glimpse of what lay beneath. Ethan's breath hitched, his eyes darting to her, before snapping back to the road. She didn't speak, letting the moment linger, the air thick with anticipation. When they pulled into the driveway, Ethan cut the engine and sat there, his hands still gripping the wheel, his breathing shallow. Claire unbuckled her seatbelt and turned to him, her expression soft but resolute. "Thank you for tonight," she said, her voice warm. "I had a wonderful time." "Me too," he mumbled, avoiding her gaze. Claire reached over, tilting his chin to meet her eyes. "Ethan, you don't have to be afraid. I'm here for you. Whatever you're feeling, you can talk to me." He stared at her, his eyes brimming with conflict, fear, desire, uncertainty. Claire leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to his cheek, her lips lingering. "Let's go inside," she said, stepping out of the car, her heels clicking as she moved toward the house. Ethan followed his mind, a storm of emotions. The familiar house felt different, charged, with an energy that made his skin prickle. Claire set her purse on the entryway table and turned to him, her expression expectant. "Why don't we sit for a while? We can talk." Ethan hesitated, his heart pounding. He knew this wasn't just about talking. The way she'd teased him, the panties in his pocket, it all meant something, and he wasn't sure he was ready. But he couldn't say no. "Okay," he said, his voice hoarse. Claire smiled and wheeled into the living room, stopping at the bar cart to pick up a bottle of bourbon. "Want one?" she asked, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "Sure," Ethan said, his throat dry. Claire bent over deliberately to pour the drinks, her dress riding up, to reveal the curve of her thigh. She knew he was watching, and she made the moment last, her movements slow and sensual. Ethan's breath caught his face flushing as he looked away. She straightened, handing him a glass, their fingers brushing, and sat on the couch, patting the space beside her. Ethan sat, leaving a small gap between them, his eyes fixed on the floor. The panties in his pocket burned like a brand. Claire studied him, her expression calculating. She leaned forward, her hand brushing his leg. "Ethan, look at me." He hesitated, then met her gaze, his eyes wide with fear and curiosity. Claire placed her hand over his, her touch warm and reassuring. "You don't have to be scared. I'm here for you." Ethan swallowed hard. "I don't know what to say." He admitted, his voice trembling. "You don't have to say anything," Claire said, shifting closer, her leg brushing his. The heat of her body was intoxicating, and Ethan's heart raced as he struggled to focus. She uncrossed her legs slowly, letting her dress ride up, then recrossed them, the movement deliberate and tantalizing. His eyes flickered to her thigh before he looked away, his face crimson. Claire leaned in, her lips grazing his ear. "Do you trust me?" Ethan's body trembled, his voice a whisper. "Yes." She smiled, her lips brushing his cheek as she pulled back, her hand resting on his thigh. The room was silent, the air thick with anticipation. Then, without warning, Claire kissed him. Ethan froze, his body rigid with shock. But as her lips moved against his soft and warm, something inside him broke. He melted into the kiss, his hands trembling as they reached for her waist. The kiss was slow, deliberate, full of unspoken promises. Claire's hands moved to his shoulders, pulling him closer, and Ethan let out a soft moan. The kiss deepened, Claire guiding him with confidence, her movements unhurried. Ethan's hands trembled on her waist, unsure, but Claire was patient. She pulled back her breath, mingling with his. "Follow my lead," she whispered, guiding his hands to her hips, then up her sides, teaching him to touch her with intention. His fingers trailed over her dress, feeling the heat of her skin beneath. Claire's hands brushed his neck, deepening the kiss, and Ethan's hands grew bolder, exploring her curves, his heart racing as he lost himself in the moment. After a while, Claire pulled back her lips, brushing his cheek. "Just a moment," she said, standing and wheeling toward the hallway. Ethan sat, his hands trembling, his mind spinning. The warmth of her lips lingered. The softness of her skin burned into his memory. When Claire returned, she was no longer in the red dress. She stood in the doorway, clad in a black lace nightie that hugged her curves, the delicate fabric leaving little to the imagination. Ethan's breath caught, his hands clenching the couch. "Do you like what you see?" Claire asked, her voice low and teasing. Ethan couldn't speak. His eyes locked on her, his heart pounding. Claire smiled, walking toward him, her movements slow and deliberate. She stopped in front of him, tilting his chin to meet her gaze. "I asked you a question," she said, her tone playful but firm. "Yes." Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. Claire leaned down, her lips brushing his ear. "Good." She stepped back, her smile teasing. "Patience," she said, as Ethan reached for her. She turned, glancing over her shoulder. "Come with me." Ethan followed, his heart thundering, his body alive with anticipation. The night was about to change everything, and he was powerless to stop it. Ethan trailed Claire down the hallway, his pulse a deafening roar in his ears. Her black lace nightie clung to her like a second skin, each step a deliberate sway of her hips, the soft click of her heels, a metronome to his racing heart. When they reached her bedroom, Claire turned, leaning against the doorframe. Her arms crossed loosely, the bedside lamp casting a golden glow over her figure. She looked like a vision, both forbidden and inviting, her eyes locking onto his with a knowing smile. "Come in," she said, her voice a velvet whisper. Ethan hesitated, his feet heavy, as if crossing the threshold would seal his fate. His mind screamed to turn back, but his body moved forward, drawn to her like a moth to flame. He stepped inside, the air thick with the scent of her jasmine perfume, the room warm and intimate. The bed was neatly made, the sheets soft and inviting, the lamp's glow softening the edges of reality. Claire closed the door behind them, the click echoing like a gunshot. She placed her hands on his chest, feeling the rapid thud of his heart. "Are you nervous?" she asked, her tone probing but gentle. "A little." Ethan admitted, his voice cracking. She smiled, her thumb brushing his cheek. "That's okay. We'll take it slow." She leaned in, her lips meeting his in a kiss that was slow and deep, full of promises that made his knees weak. His hands moved to her waist, trembling as they brushed the delicate lace of her nightie. Claire pulled back, her breath warm against his lips. "Trust me," she whispered. Taking his hand and leading him to the bed, she gently pushed him onto the mattress, climbing on top, straddling his waist. Her hands rested on his chest, her fingers tracing the outline of his muscles through his shirt. "Let me show you," she said, her voice intimate and commanding. Ethan's hands trembled on her hips, his breath hitching as she leaned down to kiss him again. Her lips moved with confidence, guiding him into uncharted territory. She taught him how to touch her, her hand guiding his to the small of her back, showing him how to explore her body with intention. "Like this," she whispered, her voice a soft command. Ethan obeyed, his fingers trailing over her skin, feeling the heat of her body against his. Claire's lips found his again, the kiss deepening her hands, brushing his neck as she pulled him closer. His hands grew bolder, exploring the curves of her body, his heart racing as he surrendered to the moment. "You're doing well, Claire," whispered, her lips brushing his cheek, her words igniting a spark of confidence in him. Ethan's hands moved to her back, pulling her closer, the lace of her nightie soft under his fingers. The night unfolded in a blur of sensations, soft touches, whispered encouragements, and slow, deliberate movements that left them both breathless. When it was over, they lay entwined, their bodies slick with sweat, their hearts still racing. Claire rested her head on Ethan's chest, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on his skin. "You were amazing," she whispered, her voice warm and sincere. Ethan smiled, his hand resting on her back. "You taught me well," he said, his voice soft. Claire chuckled, the sound low and melodic. "Get some rest," she said, her tone soothing. Ethan nodded, pulling her closer as they drifted into sleep, the world outside their room fading away. Morning came too soon, the golden light filtering through the curtains illuminating the quiet room. Ethan woke first, the scent of Claire's perfume and the warmth of their intimacy lingering in the air. His body felt relaxed, but a faint tension coiled in his chest, the weight of what they'd done settling over him. Claire was still asleep, her head on his chest, her arm draped across his waist, her breathing slow and steady. Ethan's hand rested on her back, his fingers tracing idle patterns as his mind raced. The night had been exhilarating, transformative, but now in the harsh light of day, reality crept in. Questions swirled about Rachel, about Claire, about the consequences of their actions. Guilt gnawed at him, but it was tempered by a deeper unnamed emotion, something that felt dangerously like love. Claire stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Good morning," she said, her voice husky. "Morning," Ethan replied, his voice quiet. She studied him, her eyes searching. "You okay, Ethan?" Hesitated, his hand still on her back. I don't know," he admitted, his voice trembling. Claire nodded, propping herself up on her elbows, her hand resting on his chest in a soothing rhythm. "It's okay to feel conflicted. This was a big step for both of us, but you don't have to figure it out now. Just take it one step at a time." Ethan nodded, wanting to believe her, to let go of the guilt. Claire leaned down, kissing him softly, the touch tender and reassuring. When she pulled back, she smiled, her hand on his cheek. "Let's just enjoy this moment." They lay there, their bodies entwined, the room quiet except for their breathing. Eventually, Claire slipped out of bed, reaching for a silk robe and tying it loosely around her waist. "I'm starving. How about breakfast?" Ethan nodded, his stomach tight. "Sure." She held out her hand, and he took it, letting her pull him to his feet. In the kitchen, Claire moved with ease, cracking eggs, whisking them, setting a pan to heat. "You're pretty good at this," Ethan said, trying to lighten the mood. Claire glanced over her shoulder, smiling. "Years of practice. Cooking's therapeutic." As she cooked, she kept the conversation light, asking about his favorite foods, sharing stories from her days as a dancer. Her ease helped Ethan relax, the tension easing slightly. They ate at the table by the window, the morning sun casting a warm glow. The food was comforting, the silence companionable. When they finished, Claire leaned back, her expression thoughtful. "We need to talk," she said, her tone serious but gentle. Ethan nodded, his stomach tightening. He'd known this was coming. Claire reached across the table, taking his hand. "I know this is complicated, and you're probably feeling a lot right now. But I don't regret last night, and I hope you don't either." Ethan looked at their hands, his mind racing. "I don't regret it," he said quietly, "but I don't know what this means. For us, for me and Rachel." Claire nodded, her expression understanding. "I'm not asking you to decide now. This is a lot to process. Take your time." Ethan looked up, his eyes uncertain. "What do you want?" "I want you to be happy," Claire said, her voice sincere. "And I want to be part of your life, whatever that looks like. I'm not here to pressure you." Ethan's throat tightened, gratitude and confusion swirling. They talked for a while longer, the conversation flowing easily, the morning less daunting. As they cleared the table, Claire glanced at him, smiling. "Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together." A year later, the neighbors still commented on their closeness. "Such a devoted stepson," Mrs. Callahan said at the grocery store, her eyes warm. "Always taking care of his stepmother." Claire smiled, adjusting the silver bracelet Ethan had given her, a subtle reminder of their bond. Ethan's fingers laced through hers as they walked to the car, the touch casual to outsiders, but electric to them. No one looked twice. No one knew. Their secret was theirs alone, a forbidden dance they performed in the shadows, balancing on the edge of love and taboo. And as they drove home, the Cincinnati skyline glowing in the distance, Claire knew they'd keep dancing, no matter the cost.